we're going to move on to our next segment, where we're going to talk about a cycle of playable cards. The cycle we're going to talk about today is another Legion cycle, just like we talked about last week. I've been getting into Legions lately. This is going to be the last Legion cycle for a little while. Then we're going to go back in time again. But today we want to talk about the Gempalm cycle from Legions. I was reminded of this cycle when I was doing my Muse research for last episode. I had seen a couple of these cards. I talked about the first one we're going to talk about on a previous episode, which is why I was aware that there was this cycle. Gempalm Incinerator. I talked about this one on one of our Goblins episodes because Gempalm Incinerator is in my pre-modern Goblins starting lineup. But there's a whole cycle of these cards, one for each color. It's the Gempalm cycle. It's a cycle of creatures that can be played as a creature, or they can be cycled for a cool effect. So the first one we're going to bring up today is Gempalm Incinerator. And for those who have listened to the Goblin episode but don't remember, Gempalm Incinerator is 2 colorless, 1 red. It is a 2/1 creature goblin. It's an uncommon. First printed in Legions and reprinted in Dominaria Remastered recently. You can play this guy as a 2/1 goblin, or you can cycle him for 1 colorless and 1 red. And when you cycle Gempalm Incinerator, you can have it deal X damage to target creature, where X is the number of goblins in play. So I love this guy. I think it's a great substitute for direct damage and creature removal in goblin decks. It's nice and cheap. It's $1.53 right now. You can get the Dominaria Remastered one even cheaper. And it's the reason why I don't have lightning bolts in my pre-modern goblin deck. I love that this guy exists. I think it's great. In a horde deck like this, you're probably going to have a lot of goblins out. You can cycle this guy to draw a card and to blast pretty much any creature your opponent's going to be coming at you with. Most of the time. Some of the time.
For its cycling cost, it kind of reminds me of like a Red Terror, you know what I mean? Except, a little bit more versatile.
Great utility card, still considered as a precious addition to many Goblin decks and Eternal formats. While dodging most counter spells and drawing a card in the process for just 1 colorless, 1 red has to be a good thing. Love it. Love the Gempalm Incinerator. Great Gempalm card. Next creature in the Gempalm cycle, Alex. Gempalm Strider. Gempalm Strider is an uncommon, first printed in Legions. Only other printings in dual decks. Casting cost 1 colorless, 1 green. Summon elf. It is a 2/2. You can cycle this guy for 2 colorless, 2 green. And when you cycle Gempalm Strider, all elves get +2/+2 until end of turn. I like this card. I think I'm putting this card in the category of essentially unplayed but good. I say essentially unplayed because it has a current market price of 16 cents. It's a strictly better Grizzly Bears. That gets me excited. I think the only reason this card isn't like played really is because there's just a premium for space in elf decks. You're not going to put it in anything that isn't an elf deck because not only is it an elf, but its cycling effect pumps elves. So it's going to go in an elves tribal deck, but there's just too many good elves out there. So I guess maybe I would put this potentially in an elf deck that I built because a lot of the premium cards in elf decks are like
expensive,
prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
At the moment,
budget elf deck guy.
It's a good budget elf deck guy.
Or so maybe if you're playing just an older format or something.
Not sure what they say about this guy on Gatherer.
It's 3.3.
3.321 on Gatherer. That's middle of the road. People probably think similar to us in this case, that he's a middle of the road guy. He's good but not great. This is how I feel. Sure, he was an all-star in his own limited format, but constructed has simply passed him by. Yeah, so it's just like I think it's a solid card, but there's just so many good elves. It's a highly played tribe Wizards of the Coast have been printing badass elves for a long time now, and you can't fit the Strider in there. It's not his fault. He's just outclassed. He's still decent though.
It also says strictly better than grizzly bears.
Yes. This must be another old man.
Person after your own heart.
Actually, I don't think anyone plays this as a creature. But you could. And if you did, it would be at least as good as a grizzly bear. So Gempalm Strider. I like him. He just probably doesn't get a lot of love because there are just so many good elves, you know?
Yeah.
It's like being born into the Kennedy family, but being like the psychopath anti-vaxxer Robert Kennedy or something. It's like you have presidents, famous people, politicians. What are some of the other bad Kennedys? This is like the Robert Kennedy of the elf.
Ted Kennedy.
Of the elf. Who is Ted Kennedy? The one that like killed that girl when
he was
in a car accident?
The drunk one.
Yeah, I think he killed a girl in Martha's Vineyard in a car accident, and his family helped him cover it up like 40 years ago or something. Did that happen?
He might.
If anybody's listening from the Kennedy clan, don't sue me. I'm not saying this is the truth. I just think I may have seen it somewhere on the internet. May have happened. I'm just asking questions. Next creature in the Gempalm cycle, Alex. I love this creature. Not because I actually love the creature.
Oh, I know why. I remember.
But because he sucks and he's blue, and finally blue is getting the shittiest card in a cycle.
Aha.
This Gempalm creature, Alex, is Gempalm Sorcerer. Yes. It is an uncommon, first and only printing in Legions. Never reprinted. Let's see if I'm correct about that. I am. Probably because he's terrible. He has a casting cost of 2 colorless, 1 blue. Creature wizard, 2/2. You can cycle this guy for 2 colorless and 1 blue. When you cycle Gempalm Sorcerer, all wizards gain flying until end of turn. Like Gempalm Strider, essentially unplayed because he's very cheap, but unlike Gempalm Strider, he is not good. When it comes to wizards, let's be honest, how many wizards are you ever actually going to have out on the battlefield at one time? Not many people play wizard decks.
And if you do, the wizards are probably going to be, to a large extent, utility type creatures with activated abilities who you're using from behind the lines to do something, as opposed to big beater attackers.
This is an ability, a cycling effect that you would like to probably most of the time, probably all of the time, not probably all of the time, apply to like a beatdown deck of some sort. You would want to fly over with big creatures and beat down. Like you said, it's, wizards aren't going to be beat down, and I would want this trick really for when I wanted to fly over and end the game with some beatdown creatures. If I'm tired of my opponent chump blocking my 6/6s or my 7/7s, I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to fly over and end the game. But, most wizards are tiny. They're 1/1.
That's what I'm thinking.
They're 0/1.
I want to know how many other wizards also either have flying or can give themselves flying, and then this would be unnecessary.
The only good thing I have to say about this card is I like the color scheme, and I like the wizards in the background because they look like they're jumping on trampolines.
Yeah, they're having fun.
1.900. That is a well-deserved score on Gatherer. Current market price of 13 cents. That's more than it's worth. Don't play Gempalm Sorcerer. Oh, this is an interesting comment. This comment is no longer current because it was made in 2012. But in 2012, according to Mr. Action,
This helps us.
There are 24 wizards with more than 3 power. 6 of them already have flying. Of those that don't already have flying, 12 are mana cost of 6 or more, and 2 others have to flip first. Beyond that, nearly every wizard has an activate ability way more effective than their brute strength.
Yeah,
that's what you mentioned.
What I was thinking.
Not usually why you play wizards, for brute strength to fly over and smash somebody. Here we go. Check it out, dude. It's the first and only time in the history of Magic that blue got the worst of something. Good. I'm just excited that white isn't the worst. Next Gempalm creature in the Gempalm cycle, Alex, is Gempalm Polluter.
Yes.
Gempalm Polluter.
Yeah.
A common this time around. First and only printing in Legions, although it's in the list. This has a big casting cost, and it's a bigger body. than most of the other Gempalm cards. 4/3 for 5 colorless, 1 black. You still probably don't want to pay this guy
Not-
as a creature ever because it's not casting
Not
cost
big
effective.
enough.
Not big enough. It could be lightning bolted for 6
Mhm.
mana. No, thank you.
Mhm.
You can cycle this zombie for just 2 black. And when you cycle Gempalm Polluter, you may have target player lose 1 life for each zombie in play.
Love
And
it.
he's doing jazz hands. He has a great cycling ability.
I like
It's
it.
very casting cost effective most of the time because zombies like goblins is generally a horde deck. If you have 3 zombies out, you get to do 3 damage to your opponent's life total or take away 3 life from your opponent for just 2 black mana, and you get to draw a card. Yes, please.
And you're gonna have more than 3 zombies out, probably, especially if you have like zombie tokens.
Probably. The other great thing about this card is in zombies, you're probably going to be able to bring this guy back. So
yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that too much, but
we looked him up on Gatherer last time. I wrote this down. He had a 3.959 on Gatherer. I think that is well deserved. Current market price of 26 cents. Cheap for a great card. It's just probably because people don't play a lot of zombie decks. Or at least zombies isn't as popular as goblins, for instance, as a horde deck. You could play this guy with Lord of the Undead. First printed in Plane Shift.
oh yeah, we talked about him. I forgot.
So this is a creature lord, 1 colorless, 2 black, 2/2. All zombies get +1/+1. You can pay 1 colorless, 1 black, and tap Lord of the Undead to return target zombie from your graveyard to your hand. So you have like 5 or 6 zombies out, including Lord of the Undead. You pay 2 black to do 5 or 6 damage to an opponent with the Gempalm Polluter. You pay 2 mana, tap Lord of the Undead, bring Gempalm Polluter back to your hand. You do another 5 damage. I mean, you can just keep blasting people with Gempalm Polluter, bringing them back to your hand with Lord of the Undead, or, also if you're running a zombie deck, you might be playing Unholy Grotto, a land from Onslaught, tap to add 1 colorless to your mana pool, or pay a black and tap to put a zombie card from your graveyard on top of your library.
Uh-huh.
So, all this to say, it's a very casting cost efficient way to deal direct damage to your opponent, and it's going to be played in a deck that's often containing other cards that allow you to bring cards back consistently.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of cards with recursion.
I like that it's loss of life as well instead of damage.
I will be putting this guy in my zombie deck likely, which, as I revealed in last podcast, Alex, I will likely be building a zombie deck in late 2023 or in 2024. Gempalm Polluter will be there. Alex, the final card in the Gempalm cycle is the white Gempalm. Gempalm Avenger.
Gempalm Jazz Hands.
Also jazz hands. 5 colorless, 1 white. First printed in Legions. Only other printings in dual decks. It is a summon soldier. It is 3/5. So also 6 mana cost. Cannot be bolted. But again, you don't want to play any of these cards really as the creature. You want to use them in your deck for the cycling ability. Cycling cost for 2 colorless, 1 white. When you cycle Gempalm Avenger, all soldiers get +1/+1 and gain first strike until end of turn. I love +1/+1. I love first strike.
I like everything he does with soldiers here. I like that he's a soldier. That's, the best part about him, though, is, the soldier action. Like you said, his cat, can't really play him by himself.
Current market price of 19 cents. Not played all that often. It's a it could also be cheap because it's a common, but really I think it's not played very often. I think it's because it just has a very narrow ability. It's only worth its salt in soldier decks. Soldiers are a tribe, but they're not one of the highly played tribes. They're not one of people's favorite tribal decks.
And again, you probably have your deck's probably full, like with your other options before you get to this guy.
True, similar to the elf situation. 2.875 on Gatherer. I think that's well deserved. I think that's about where it should sit. I like the art. My favorite thing about this card is that it's not the worst of the cycle, and it's the white card.
Yeah.
So while not the worst of the cycle this time around, it's probably the second worst. It's the second worst of the cycle. But that's the end of the Gempalm cycle, Alex. I like these guys.